Hello, everyone, and thanks for listening to the Quality Hub, Chatting with ISO Experts. I'm your host, Xavier Francis, and today I'm here with Norm Verbeck, consultant from Core. Glad you could join us.
Glad to be here.
Norm's going to be a guest on the next 2 weeks, and this week we're going to be talking about common pitfalls in maintaining ISO certification. But before we dig into that, let's hear about your journey, and I have a quick question. When you eat your pizza, do you fold it or do you leave it open?
So I typically leave it open
of
most the time. So it depends. If it's a little warm, maybe I'll fold it just because, might lose some of the stuff.
Yeah. I usually fold mine.
Yep.
I think I'm pretty messy, so I think it keeps me from dripping it on me. But
absolutely.
That's always important, how you eat your pizza. And it probably depends where you're at in the country. You can't really fold a deep dish. Here in PA, it's a little bit thinner usually.
Typically, yep.
Yep. If you can share a little about your journey, I know we've got a little bit of history on you, but anything new?
Yeah, sure. So I've worked in most of my experiences from manufacturing type environments, but 20 years experience working in, quality management within two different types of manufacturing companies. Used to work in printing, and then obviously that industry is kind of somewhat declining. So I eventually then moved into stated manufacturing, but worked for a door manufacturing facility.
Okay.
So, and then I've been with Core Business Solutions for almost 5 years now.
Oh, 5 years. I remember when you started. That was around COVID, yeah.
Yeah, just before.
COVID year, because I remember coming out and meeting you for getting you some stuff that you needed. Well, that's great. Again, thank you for being here, and let's get started. So again, we're talking about common pitfalls in maintaining your ISO certification. The first question would be, what are the most overlooked clauses in ISO 9001 during surveillance audits?
So one of the ones that falls into play a little bit is change management.
Okay.
And it's just because there's kind of like three different areas in the standard where they discuss that.
Yep.
So one is like just broader general planning of changes for, not even so much the quality management system, but just business in general.
Yeah.
Another one is where they talk about changes to requirements for your products or services.
Okay.
So that's typically, when customers request changes to, might be a simple change, even like for a manufacturing company, the quantity of products or maybe a delivery date.
So it doesn't have to be the specs necessarily.
No, it could be specs, could be just simple things. But but that, that's usually, most companies don't miss that because that directly impacts the customers when those changes come into play. Another one for kind of the broader business related changes though is the standard's asking you to look to see, they kind of word it as doing a review of the changes, and they use the words to the extent necessary, so it leaves it a little bit broader
ambiguous,
to your discretion. But they do want to see records of that review.
Okay.
And then who's approving the changes.
Gotcha.
So basically they're looking for a change management process.
Right.
Another clause they typically look for is within the broader realm of document control.
Okay.
So one of the things companies struggle a little bit with is maintaining records of like the ongoing periodic review and reapproval of documents. They don't miss, you might have the initial approval, but then having evidence that you're kind of periodically reviewing those, whether it's once a year, every 2 years, or, if something changes more frequently, you might be reviewing things every 6 months.
Right.
But the records of those reapprovals, that's something that's sometimes missed.
For our listeners that are Core customers and using Core, you can set up those dates as reminders of when they're coming due for specific.
The system records those records of reapprovals, and it sends reminders based on whatever it needs, for particular types of document classes. Some things might need reviewed every 6 months versus once a year versus every 2 years. But but
that'll track it for you, which is
absolutely
really useful.
And then another small piece that is often overlooked is when you're documenting nonconformances. So when you document nonconformances, a lot of times you document what you're doing with it, whether, you have to, so if it's like products, if you're segregating, correcting, if you identify something nonconforming from a supplier, or you're returning it, or do you have to scrap something? But the piece that's missed is beyond that is actually who's authorizing that disposition. So they want to see a record of who's authorizing it.
Not just that it was, but who said it and who did
That's right. Yep.
Okay.
So that's another piece that's sometimes overlooked and missed, but that's actually, it's kind of embedded. Sometimes it's easy to overlook, but that's one of the requirements in the standard.
So a lot of change is missed.
Yep.
Like documenting that change, documenting certain nonconformities, and documenting dispositions.
That's right.
Who approved or disapproved. Okay.
Yep. Yep. And one other one I'll just throw in there is there's under one of the clauses is relating to supplier management.
Okay.
And the standard talks about it in two different ways. One is qualifying suppliers before you start using them,
Right.
showing evidence of qualification of a supplier to start using. And then the other piece is like ongoing evaluation. So
Right.
sometimes, you might think those words are synonymous, qualification versus evaluation.
No, one's over time. Yeah, I can see, you want to keep doing that.
But they're two different things. So basically those need to be spelled out for the first qualification of and then ongoing evaluation of suppliers.
Well, what's interesting about this, talking about all these things that are missed easily and forgotten, is core. Again, I'm not trying to make this all about our software, but it's great to know that all of that can be set up to review to make sure you're doing that in core and then have the evidence.
Yep.
All that can be then there for documented proof for your surveillance office.
That's right.
Okay, that's great. So we've talked about this a little bit before actually a lot on podcast about leadership. But what role does leadership play in sustaining or sabotaging your ISO 9001 system?
So we'll start with the sustainment piece.
Okay.
So
Let's start with the positive.
That's right. So with sustainment, one of the big things is just ongoing demonstration of their commitment to the quality management system. Basically providing the necessary people, making sure your infrastructure is in place and being maintained. You're providing training and even tools to help implement and then ongoing maintenance of the QMS. Right. Also promoting a quality culture. So you need to embed your values into everyday behaviors and decisions. That helps to foster a culture of continuous improvement over time.
Yeah. But we've talked about both of those if people are listening and they haven't listened to those podcasts. We have a lot on culture of quality and getting that, promoting it and building it.
Absolutely. Another one is maintaining customer focus. That helps to sustain the system. Allocating resources, so making sure you provide the necessary people, training that we talked about.
And training is a big one. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Making sure that people are trained and understand where everything goes.
Yes, because over time you have new employees, people move on. But anyways, that ongoing training program is definitely vital. Trying to integrate the quality management system with your normal business processes, because initially you're kind of implementing maybe some new things that might not have been in place for your initial certifications. But then it's actually, making sure you kind of align and integrate those with your normal business processes. So it's not like you're doing something just for an audit. It's just something you kind of do all the time over time.
And you're going to get more benefit by doing that as well. If you just make ISO part of what you do, that it's just part of business, you're fulfilling the obligations that you need to for the ISO system, as well as it's just part of your day-to-day business.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're basically just always audit ready at any point in time. So it's just part of your daily practice. So another piece is driving continual improvement. So looking to people that are actually, doing the work. They're the ones that best know to, where some of the gaps or some of the maybe, things that aren't working that efficiently. They have some ideas for improvement. It's just everybody gets kind of busy and they don't always
take a step back and look at that type of stuff. And again, that's going to help build and maintain that quality culture.
Absolutely.
All right. So what are some of the negative things? Some of the ways that they can sabotage it, knowingly or unknowingly?
So one of the big ones is lack of ownership or engagement. So it's always important to have direct ownership to a particular, you can kind of start with a department, but you want to kind of make sure you have ownership to a person. Because if you kind of leave it to ownership of a department, then nobody really owns it.
Right. So, and there are those people that are like, oh, that's just for that ISO stuff. And for some reason, it leaves a bad taste in their mouth. And that's where it can be a little bit of sabotage where I don't want to say you meant to, but you're not finding the value of it.
Absolutely. And initially, some of the ownership might kind of be with maybe a quality department if they, depending on the company, the way they're structured. But eventually, you want to integrate that into where it really belongs.
Right.
So you get that engagement from all the departments of the business. Poor communication is another one. So if you fail to communicate the importance of the QMS or changes that occur within it, that can lead to confusion or resistance and even disengaging of people at different levels in the company. So
why didn't I know this? Oh, here we go again.
Absolutely. So undermining the QMS. So, taking shortcuts, bypassing your procedures or just ignoring nonconformities or even just kind of dealing with them and not documenting them. by documenting nonconformances, you can start identifying trends and identify recurring issues. But if you don't document them and just deal with them and move on, then you kind of lose sight of what the recurring problems are.
Yeah, and I mean that the reason to document this stuff isn't just a paper exercise thing. It's so you can look at data, metrics, KPIs, and say, hey, what's going on here? And you can look at your business from that perspective and see those trends and those things that may be a problem that you're not seeing it as its whole picture.
Absolutely. And another one of the big ones would be just not providing the right support for training and resources. So, if you start cutting corners on training or not investing in training or, some of the QMS tools, basically the system won't evolve like it should be in responding to your organizational changes.
So really important that management owns it and is aware of what they need to do and also what they may kind of not focus on the way they should. So These are great points. So how do successful companies maintain the enthusiasm and accountability for ISO compliance over time? It can be like, oh my gosh, sometimes we have to keep doing this. But how do you keep that up? How do you keep that going?
So one of the big things is showing and communicating what the benefits are that you're getting out of the system.
Okay.
So people get enthusiastic if they see results.
Right.
So, basically show, what your measurable improvements are. That could be in efficiency gains, fewer defects or errors, maybe better audit results, or even lower costs.
Right.
Eventually, by improvements, it should be helping to improve the bottom line as well.
You're really showing the successes of the ISO system to people that are using it.
Yep.
Anything else?
So with the benefits, it's good to kind of link the compliance to what the business outcomes are. That could be better client trust, new certifications that you're achieving, or even, access to different markets. So one of the big points of ISO certifications, that might be a requirement of certain customers or contracts that you can't even bid on them without having the certification. So another one is helping to set meaningful KPIs or objectives, and then celebrating those wins when you kind of achieve or make those improvements.
Right.
So if you regularly measure and communicate those KPIs, then people will know what they are, and then you want to recognize the teams and individuals who are helping to contribute to successful audits or those improvements.
Yeah, that's really important because again, you're keeping them, I don't want to say happy, but they're seeing the results that you were saying and how it benefits them.
Absolutely. And then the final one I would say is keeping the systems lean and practical. So don't overcomplicate the system. Keep things simple. You want to basically make sure that you're deriving value from what you're putting in place. But as much as you can, it's good to automate and streamline documentation and reporting. Avoid overcomplicating the QMS system. Keep things simple. And then periodically reviewing your procedures to help basically eliminate any unnecessary complexity. You can kind of streamline or simplify things over time.
Gotcha. So with this, why do we find that some businesses view ISO 9001 as a compliance exercise instead of performance improvement and using it as that kind of tool?
So initially, you have to pass an audit. But basically maintaining that focus that you're just putting too much emphasis that the system's just to pass an audit.
Okay.
So if that's the primary goal, instead of genuinely improving processes, employees tend to associate it with just kind of like a box checking or paperwork exercise. But the audit-driven culture, that really reduces ISO to just a compliance checklist and not really a tool for continuous improvement.
Yeah, and which is what it's supposed to be.
Absolutely.
The reason people may be required to do that is to show that they're able to continually improve and have things in place. If you're just checking boxes, that's not the same thing.
No.
How does a weak integration of your QMS into daily operations lead to some of that failure?
So there's a couple different ways that basically can result in that failure, but the QMS is designed to ensure consistent quality, compliance, and continual improvement. But without the integration, its effectiveness, that could be compromised. But a couple of the ways that it could fail is lack of employee engagement, so not getting everybody involved. Inconsistent processes. So, that's where it's good to, even though the standard doesn't require SOPs, is where there's risk for failures or errors to be made. It's beneficial to have some SOPs in place just to kind of, if nothing else, for training of new people, just kind of standardize the way things are supposed to be done.
A refresher.
Absolutely. Poor data and record keeping. So that is another issue that could arise. Decisions are made. If you don't have good data, then decisions could be faulty.
Yeah. Well, I got a feeling. Well, what do the numbers say? What does the data show?
Absolutely. Some of the feedback loops and improvement initiatives, they could be sidelined if that's the case. Could also be siloed operations. So the QMS, you don't want that to just be isolated within the quality department.
Right.
You want to make sure that's integrated with your business processes. Maybe management detachment. So leadership does not actively support, or they really don't model or demonstrate those quality-focused behaviors.
Yeah. And that's going to stop it and showing other people that this is important.
That's right. Ineffective risk management's another one. So, the risk you need to make sure you go through periodically and identify what are the bigger risks within the business, and then try to put some plans in place to help mitigate those risks. And then the final one I'd say is like kind of failing to meet customer expectations. But if customer feedback is not fed into the adjustments that you're making, that can lead into a decline in customer satisfaction and loyalty over time.
Yeah, which can hurt your business.
Yeah, I mean, basically, if you don't integrate your QMS, it's like having a map with that no one uses. So it might be accurate, but it's not going to get you to where you need to go. So to succeed, you really have to make sure that QMS is part of your daily rhythm of what your business is doing.
Okay.
So, and that helps influence decisions, helps guide your behaviors, and it drives improvement across all levels within the company.
Yeah. We talked about it a little bit, but what role does employee engagement play in the success or the failure of 9001 maintenance?
So one of the big ones is, initially top-down implementation can occur at some level just because you have to put some things in place that may be new.
Right.
But over time, it's really important to make sure you're engaging all employees, because that can lead to lack of engagement if you don't.
Right.
And it can ultimately impact the success or failure of maintaining the system over a long period of time.
Right. But if you're not doing it from top down, and they're not seeing and they're not buying into it and they're not following through, you're not going to get the data you need for your metrics. You're not going to get them to pay attention to the instructions that they need. Or, maybe they're going to do it their way instead of the way the process says to do it. So many things that could result from that.
Yep. So yeah, when you don't involve the employees, it's not always aligning with what the actual flow within the departments are. And then also, if you don't engage the employees, they might see ISO as something that's done to them versus not with them.
Oh, that's a really good point. I never thought about that, where, well, we have to do this and they want me to, and it's us, them kind of thing versus doing it together.
Absolutely.
So we're talking about ISO here. And when you're prepping for your first initial audit, and then, you're doing your surveillance audits and you've been doing it for a few years, you can get tired of it. You can get ISO fatigue, if you will, or even audit anxiety. Can that become a risk in a maturing system?
It can. So initially, when you're first getting certified, and even probably over the first 2 to 3 years of the initial cycle, because obviously there's ongoing audits each year. Right. But initially, like the internal audits that you have to do are going to be very close to when the external certification or surveillance audits are going to be. So often they're close to one another. But as the system matures, it's a good practice, in my experience, to kind of space them out. So you don't have too many audits like at one time, because that can lead to anxiety. And it just kind of, can wear.
Here we go again. Another one of those audits.
Yep. So after you initially get certified, you can kind of basically back up your internal audit to do a little bit earlier before the next audit with the external body. But if ISO fatigue sets in, the QMS can become more of like a paper system. People are just kind of checking the box. It exists only to pass the audits, but doesn't really reflect what you're actually doing. This can create a false sense of security, and it doesn't really help maintain control of the system over time.
Yeah, it really can become unreliable. Your data can become unreliable. It's going to keep you from making the proper choices moving forward in your business. So the more accurate everything is in your ISO system, the better data you're going to have, the better you can manage your business.
That's right.
This has been really good. Do you have any other insights, last thoughts about, how to deal with some of the common pitfalls in maintaining your ISO?
No, just the main points are, making sure your leadership's engaged and making sure you're involving your employees. Just because if you don't involve your employees, then there's basically lack of engagement throughout the system, and it's not really going to drive the long-term improvements that the company's looking for.
And within that, probably make sure that you're paying attention to change and paying attention to not document just to document, but document what needs to and understand the importance of the documentation.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, and CORE is certainly here to help if you maybe have had some ISO fatigue, if you're not seeing the benefits you think you should. We can help you here at Core Business Solutions. If you're not using our software, Core ISO Compliance Platform, that's something that really can help in some of these things that are missed, some of the things that are forgotten, and keeping that engagement. Really appreciate your help here today, and really, talking about this, really interesting.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be here.
Always a pleasure to have you. And we want to thank everyone who's listened to our podcast today. We hope it's been informative for you. Now, if you're looking for more information about Core Business Solutions, as we're now an LRQA company, and how we can help you with ISO certification, cybersecurity, or even customized training, please email us at info@thecoresolution.com. You can also visit our website at www.thecoresolution.com. If you haven't already followed us on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube, please be sure to do so. That way you won't miss the next Quality Hub podcast when it's released next week. Have a great day.